Welcome to this explainer. If you've got a kiddo between the ages of 2 and 8, you already know the absolute exhaustion that comes with a full-blown meltdown. You're trying to leave the park, or maybe you just made the mistake of giving them the blue cup instead of the red cup, and suddenly, bam, your child is screaming, throwing themselves on the floor, and literally nothing you do seems to help. It's so overwhelming. But today, we're actually going to look at the science of why this happens. I'm going to guide you through this to validate that incredibly universal struggle and, more importantly, give you a super practical developmental approach to building up emotional regulation in your kids. So let me ask you a highly relatable question. Why is it that telling a toddler to just calm down almost always makes things 10 times worse? I mean, you've definitely tried it, right? You say, just take a deep breath and calm down, and the screaming somehow just gets louder. Well, the answer actually doesn't lie in your child being bad or defiant. The answer lies completely in their biology. All right, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the calm down myth, the defense cascade, the absolute power of co-regulation, a realistic timeline of skills, some age-appropriate tools, and finally, practicing in the calm. Okay, let's jump straight into section 1, the calm down myth, and understanding the neurobiological imbalance. Let's look at the biological reality of early childhood emotions. On one side, you have the amygdala. This is the brain's threat detection center, and in toddlers, it is highly active and functionally mature. It's essentially the brain's gas pedal for fear and intense emotion. But on the other side is the prefrontal cortex. This is the logic center, responsible for that top-down emotional regulation. Now, in young children, it's highly immature. So what you have is a fully active threat detection system, but the brain's brakes simply haven't been built yet. When you tell them to use logic to calm down, you're literally asking them to use hardware they just don't possess yet. Moving right along to section 2, the defense cascade. Let's talk about the fight, flight, and freeze responses. So what happens in a child's body when that highly active amygdala detects a perceived threat, like, say, being told it's time to leave the playground? The body kicks into a rapid, automatic physiological reaction called the defense cascade. First up is arousal, where their heart rate jumps and their attention narrows. Then comes the freeze response. And here's a really surprising fact. Freezing is so often misinterpreted by parents as defiance or ignoring instructions, but it's not. Research shows it's actually attentive immobility. It's the body's automatic superhero defense system preparing for action. Next is flight, where they might try to run away or hide. And finally, fight, where active defense kicks in, like pushing, screaming, or hitting. This whole cascade completely shuts down higher order thinking, which is exactly why logic completely goes out the window. Which brings us to section 3, the power of co-regulation and lending your nervous system. Because your child's prefrontal cortex is immature, they cannot self-regulate. They just can't. They desperately need to borrow your calm presence. We call this co-regulation. It basically means providing a warm, responsive relationship where you literally lend your own nervous system to help bring theirs back down to baseline. You are acting as their external prefrontal cortex until theirs finishes developing. And this is the real kicker right here. A caregiver's capacity for co-regulation depends entirely on their own self-regulation skills. Young children are incredibly sensitive barometers of adult emotions. If you're stressed, angry, and dysregulated, you're actually going to increase your child's agitation. So we as caregivers have to manage our own stress, take a deep breath, and regulate ourselves first before we can ever hope to soothe our kids. Think of it exactly like putting your own oxygen mask on first. Let's move to section 4, the timeline of regulation skills. It's so important to manage our expectations here. Let's look at how these skills naturally build over time. In infancy, babies rely entirely on physical soothing, like sucking a pacifier or their fingers. By toddlerhood, so around ages 2 to 3, they can begin to briefly delay gratification, like waiting just a few seconds for a toy, and they start using visual tools like feeling faces to point out how they feel. Then, in the preschool years, rapid brain growth allows them to start identifying simple solutions to problems and, with a ton of adult support, begin using simple strategies like taking deep breaths. Knowing this timeline is huge because it helps you avoid expecting a 3-year-old to have the emotional control of an 8-year-old. It's just not physically possible. All right, section 5, age-appropriate calming tools. Let's get into the practical stuff and build your domestic toolkit. Since children under 6 really struggle with abstract instructions, you have to use concrete, physical, and playful techniques to relieve that physiological arousal. For a toddler, you can't just say, breathe, it won't work. Instead, try putting a stuffed animal on their belly and say, let's make Teddy go up and down. For a preschooler, you can introduce an emotion thermometer to help them visualize how hot their anger is getting.
You can pair this with muscle relaxation. Tell them to make themselves super tight like a robot and then completely floppy like a noodle. This physically releases the tension of that defense cascade. By early school age, around 7 to 9, you can start introducing more formal guided counting, like breathing in for 4 and out for 4.
For those older, school-aged kids who might be facing anxiety, the 5-4-3-2-1 sensory grounding technique is absolutely brilliant. It engages all 5 senses like a little I Spy game. You have them name 5 things they see, 4 they can touch, 3 they can hear, 2 they can smell, and 1 they can taste. At this age, you can also introduce thought challenging, where you help them pause and ask, wait, is this worry actually true? This mental game works wonders because it forces the brain's focus away from the anxiety trigger and onto highly specific, concrete details. It essentially gives the nervous system a chance to stand down. Finally, Section 6, practice in the calm. This is literally the secret to success for making any of these tools work. Here is a massive warning. We absolutely cannot expect a toddler or preschooler to learn a brand new breathing trick or muscle relaxation technique while they are in the middle of a screaming meltdown. That is literally like trying to teach someone calculus while the house is on fire. Their higher order thinking is offline. They cannot learn in that moment. You've got to front load this stuff. You must focus on teaching these strategies before the upset even happens. Practice things like blowing out imaginary candles or doing the robot and noodle game during quiet, cozy moments at home. Doing this when they're happy and safe builds up that muscle memory, so the tools are actually there when the crisis hits. But look, meltdowns are still gonna happen. That's just childhood. So when that inevitable sensory overload hits, keep these steps in your back pocket. Drop the logic. Don't ask a bunch of questions. It just overwhelms them way more. Keep it super simple by briefly labeling the emotion, like, I see you're feeling very frustrated right now. Then provide an immediate sensory cure. Maybe that's a tight, grounding squeeze and a heavy blanket, or turning down the bright lights, or just offering a cold sip of water to interrupt that nervous system response. And above all, just offer your calm physical presence. Let them know, hey, I'm right here. I really want to leave you with this one empowering thought today. Remember, your child isn't giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time. Their brain is quite simply still building its brakes. When you approach their big emotions with empathy rather than frustration, you totally change the dynamic. So the next time that meltdown hits, ask yourself, are you ready to lend them your brakes? I hope this explainer gave you some great insights and a solid toolkit. Thanks so much for learning with me today.